when we encounter stress, we sometimes feel like we must have, in some sense, failed. That's really the dirty underbelly of this idea that stress is toxic. We're told if you're stressing somebody out, you're the villain. If somebody is stressing you out, you should get away from that relationship. Instead of saying, is there stress as the metric for whether something is good or bad, I want you to ask a different question. Will this experience, person, relationship, task, whatever it is, will it serve me?
Hmm.
Is it serving me? Does it match my priorities? And if it does, then use your resilience skills. And if it doesn't, then set a boundary.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Hello, fellow do-gooders and friends. I'm your host, Corinna Bellizzi, an activist and cause marketer who's passionate about social impact and sustainability. So passionate, in fact, that I even created a 5-step guide to help unleash your inner activist. If you're curious, just go to caremorebebetter.com and sign up for our newsletter. It will be your welcome gift in your email inbox moments later. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Deborah Gilboa, also known as Dr. G, to talk about resilience and how we can all see stress differently so we can embrace change in a healthy way. Dr. G is a board-certified family physician and internationally renowned resilient expert. She works with leaders to help them understand how to harness the power of stress and help their people open to change. Her new book, From Stress to Resilient, is an actionable guide to help you handle more and feel it less. Dr. G, I'm so glad to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, I want to really just start with something that is a little curious about your background. I haven't seen many or heard of many people who started off being in theater and even in the comedy circuit to then kind of transition to working as a medical doctor, going to get their medical doctor degree. So why don't you talk a little bit about that experience and what made you choose this line of work?
I don't know that I've met anybody else either, although I've met chefs and musicians and philosophers all turned doctor. So I don't think it's entirely unique. For me personally, when I was a kid and people would ask me what I wanted to do, I gave them the most impressive sounding answer I could find, pediatric neurosurgeon, because I liked the way they reacted to me when I said it. And I did have it in my mind for a long time that I thought it would be neat to be a doctor. And then I went to freshman year biology and had to dissect a fetal pig and had a reaction that a lot of pubescent kids have to something that's gross. I got really sick. And I didn't know that those reactions are heightened during puberty and I might not always feel that way. Like most teenagers, I thought how I felt right then is how I would always feel, and it would always be like that. And so I decided, I obviously cannot be a doctor. And I was working in theater in my junior high and in my high school. And I thought, this is such an interesting experience. And I love how this feels and what I get to do. And did you know you can go to college for this? And so that is what I actually went to university for. I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts in drama. And I did something that very few of my friends did. I graduated from the school I started at in the major I started at in just 4 years, which was really weird. And then I worked in theater and television for about 6 years. But what I discovered was that the opportunities that I found, I happened to get some really amazing opportunities much younger than other people, mostly through circumstance and my willingness to say, sure, why not? I might be able to do that. And the place where I ended up was an amazing opportunity. I was at an improv theater in Chicago called The Second City. And it's a great place to be. But the person I replaced had been there 27 years or so. And I realized that I did not necessarily want to do that for 27 more years. And when I cast around to say, what would I like to do then? I need to earn a living, et cetera. I thought, well, I've been a volunteer emergency medical technician. I think I'll be a paramedic. So I called some friends who were paramedics, and every single one of them said, don't be a paramedic. You'd be terrible at it. And I was so dismayed. And so one guy, I pushed back and I said, why would you say that? And he said, I've run calls with you and you're always trying to think of a different way to do something or a better way. You don't like to work within the system. Just go be a doctor. And I thought, I am sure I am too old to go to medical school. I was 25. And so I
You can
obviously,
feel that way. I mean, I went back and got my MBA at 42, and I was the old hag in the room. Like, let's be honest.
flat out, my group of friends in medical school, my very first birthday, which is in November, they gave me a walker and a pack of Depends. I mean, it was, for turning 26. So there's no question
Oh,
that I was not alone in thinking that maybe this was a crazy thing to do.
hmm.
But I ended up in medicine. Uh, Medical school is 4 years, residency is another 3. So I was in my mid 30s before I was starting to figure out what it meant to actually be an attending physician.
Wow. So, do you think that that experience was part of what helped you become this resilience expert, having to kind of pivot from comedy to a very different role?
No, that wasn't stressful for me, meaning that wasn't something that seemed like a challenge I had to overcome, but it was absolutely crucial in figuring out that my life's work is around resilience and mental health and stress because in medical school, I heard over and over again from my professors that stress is the new smoking. And if
Hmm.
I wanted to save my patients, I needed to convince them to drop stress like we had spent the last 30 years at that point trying to get people to stop smoking. And so here was the lesson in the classroom: stress is bad for you. And then
Right.
every time I stepped out of the classroom, my professors would say things to me like, you should also be leading this group. You should also be doing a research project. What are you doing to move this other thing forward? How can you lead? And I thought, boy, this is stressful. Are they trying to kill me because they don't want me to compete with them for a job? Or am I missing some nuance about stress? And that question that lived somewhat bitterly as I felt oppressed by all these expectations inside me really kept needling me as I watched some of my patients deal with what, by any measure, is an insane amount of stress and thrive. And some people struggle without what looked like, by outside measure, to be all that much stress and every possible variation in between.
Mm. Well, I find it interesting because I think I've been told that I thrive on stress. And I don't know if that's necessarily a truth. I just think I like a packed schedule. I get a lot done when I do have a lot of things that are on my plate. And what do they say? The saying is, um, idle hands are the devil's playmate or something to that effect. These old kind of colloquialisms that we don't really say that much anymore. So I wonder what makes stress actually harmful and what is an unhealthy stress, so to speak, and what is a healthier stress?
So that's a little bit like saying what physical activity is dangerous and what physical activity is healthy. It's all in how you use it.
Hmm.
So if I told you, Corinna, that walking up one flight of stairs to sit down and have this conversation with you, that even though I'm pretty healthy, I got a little out of breath, you're too nice to say it, but you know what I need. If I, as a healthy person, walk up one flight of stairs and get out of breath, I probably need some exercise.
Yeah, you
I
probably
need
do.
to walk
Right.
up more stairs
Hmm.
because I should be a little bit more fit than that. I shouldn't get winded from one flight of stairs if I don't have any underlying issues. If I want to be able to walk up 2 flights of stairs carrying a laundry basket and not be winded, then I'm going to have to do a little bit more work. Well, it's the exact same idea with stress. If I want to be able to face the stressors that involve doing more leadership because I'm interested in it, having a packed schedule because that feels productive to me or good to me, being engaged in adult relationships, being supportive of my family members, taking care of my kids, looking for the next work opportunity, that's a lot of stress. So if I want to be able to navigate that stress without feeling exhausted and hurting at the end of the day, it's actually stress that will get me there.
Hmm.
But just like it was exercise that would get me more fit to walk upstairs, I can't decide, well, I'd like to walk upstairs better. I guess I'll run a marathon tomorrow because I could legitimately die. People have tried to run a marathon with no training and they have died. And I could absolutely be one of those people. I'm not ready. So using stressors intentionally with coaching, with support, with sleep, with hydration, with nutrition, the parallels to physical training are pretty close. So we can use most stresses to our advantage. And thinking about stress in that way, is it necessary? Because some stress is just unavoidable. Your family member gets a God forbid diagnosis. You didn't choose that. You can't walk away from it. It just is. Okay. So some stress is unavoidable. The other stress, is it useful or not useful in your life at this time? Does it match your priorities? So any stress that matches your priorities and isn't damaging, that you could walk away from, you get to decide if you should. If it matches your priorities, right? It's within your boundaries of what you've said. Yeah, this feeds my goals. This feeds my life. This is the kind of person I want to be. And you have the bandwidth for it. That's usually what we say, meaning it's not going to, a yes to this won't make you say no to other things that you can't say no to, like getting any sleep or being with your people or feeding yourself. There are lots of ways to think about stress. The only thing I take issue with is this idea that all stress is toxic, because it isn't.
Well, and so many stresses, as you said, are unavoidable. People you love are going to die. That's a reality of life, right? You might get sick yourself. You might have an overburdened workload and suddenly lose an employee because of some unforeseen thing. Now you have to pick up the slack and the deadline isn't going to move, or you have to prepare to give a presentation on stage in front of hundreds of people and you have something happen in the meantime. Like, I know you've done media tours, you've had the experience of being out there in big ways and not necessarily having the option of saying, I need to call it in today. I can't do this. So how do you advise, let's say, even your patients on how to manage stress in their daily life?
What you're asking about is great. It's to say the unavoidable stressors, what about those, right? That's like, basically it's the stress, the exercise analogy is you woke up and I said to you, yeah, I don't care if you're ready. You have to run a marathon today. You're saying, but it's going to hurt me. I'm not ready. I can't, but you're right. I do. I have to, because my mom got a bad diagnosis, just for example. When I got the call that my mom had a fall that it turned out would end her life about 6 weeks later, I couldn't say, yeah, cool. I know I'm an only child, but I actually just found out yesterday that I'm getting audited by the IRS. This is a true story, by the way. And when I bit down on something this morning, I cracked a tooth all the way through. So my mom needing emergent medical care, it's just too many things. I can't do it. Sorry. Right. We don't get to do that. We have to figure out how, which is one of the reasons as a family doctor, I spend a lot of time on preventive care. I spend a lot of time on health maintenance so that we can catch the cancer before it's cancer, so that we can, make sure that the high blood pressure doesn't get worse or prevent the high blood pressure. And one of the things I really want to encourage people to do is to strengthen themselves now while they can. Not that it's easy, not that you're not dealing with stress now, but to think about getting into a little bit more resilient shape now, because it's not if I get sick, it's when I get sick. I will, unless I'm hit by a truck. At some point, I will get sick in my life. And it's not if my family members will have struggles or die, or if my work will go badly for a while. It's when. So I want to be in training so that although those things will be incredibly difficult, it won't be quite as hard as it could be. Let's take all that off the table and say, look, right now, today, I wake up and I've got all three of those problems that you mentioned, or three different problems. And what do I do? And that's when I want to remind you that what I'm recommending building is resilience, and you already have some. You don't start this off with zero, and nobody's resilience is fixed. It's not eye color. Corinna, have you heard the expression growth mindset in education?
Oh, yeah. Right. I've heard it in almost it seems like it's a very popular term these days too. I think it gets misunderstood. So how would you define it?
So, well, what I wanted to say is that we've heard about it a lot in education since the mid-90s. Carol Dweck did a lot of work along with her colleagues to say, it turns out that kids who are in, say, a low reading group might not always be appropriate in a low reading group. The kids can learn to learn, not just learn stuff, but they can learn to learn. And it turns out that we can more than just learn to learn stuff. We can learn to learn musicality, athleticism, artistic ability, and we can learn to learn resilience. We can grow our resilience, which is what made me so interested as a doctor. I wanted to know what was this difference between helping my patients get better from an injury or an illness and actually helping them be well. And a lot of the medical literature calls that gap patient resilience, which is a great way for us to be like, not our problem, that's on you. And I was not satisfied with that. So I said, okay, I get that. What is that? What is resilience? And there isn't a ton of research about this because most resilience research is done on people with bad PTSD, like combat veterans, or people with severe chronic mental illness. So I was able to start working with a lab. And the first thing we did sounds very basic. We took the 8 most scientifically validated resilience measuring scales. You could find them online, right? I'm just going to take a resilience quiz. There are 8 really scientifically validated scales that we use to measure resilience in adults. And we listed every question that every one of them asked into one long list. And then we evaluated them and figured out that they are asking about 8 skills. There are 8 skills that make us more resilient. And if you don't mind, right now, I have to define resilience.
Yeah, and I'm getting ready to take notes here. I just literally uncapped my pen. I'm like, I want to write this down. I'd encourage my audience to do the same thing. I mean, when we have a guest like Dr. G on the show and they're just getting ready to share this nugget of information that is going to be in the book too, which you can go ahead and access, it's a good idea to get a pen out. You'll learn it.
And you might think, why are we talking about this on a show for do-gooders? You're all about creating change. You're all about helping people do things that stress them out or to navigate a situation that's really hard. You're trying to solve people's problems with them. I hope with them and not just for them. And
Right.
So when we think about that, we have to think about helping people be resilient is not about throwing them in situations that are hard and seeing how it goes for them and imagining that that will make them stronger. You talked about old phrases that we don't use that much any longer. One of the ones I hate is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Ugh.
In truth, what doesn't kill you makes you miserable.
Yeah, there's truth in that. There's absolutely truth in
Some
that.
people, it makes them stronger. But Corinna, I'm not going to ask you who, but would you think for a minute, do you know anybody who's been through a lot of hard things and it just never seems to get any easier for them?
Oh yeah, the Eeyores. There are a few of those in my life. Yes.
And I don't even mean people who are just looking for badness. I mean people who, like, every time you talk to them, something new and horrible is genuinely happening to them, and they never seem to get any more adept or comfortable at navigating it. So just going through hard things is not the same thing as lifting weights to get
Right.
stronger. So I define resilience, and in a lot of the literature, we just define resilience as the ability to navigate change and come through it the kind of person you want to be. That is a really, I think, accessible definition that highlights that resilience isn't only needed in times of adversity or struggle. That's more grit. Resilience is needed in all change. And there's a neuroscience reason for that. The reason is that our brains hate change.
Yes. It's like it's hardwired in us to resist
And
change.
here's why. Your brain has a million functions, but it has one job. That job is to keep you alive.
Right.
Since you are currently alive and you will definitely die, your brain is suspect about every single change that you introduce. Everything from there's a new variant to COVID to the office vending machine went from Pepsi to Coke. Every single change, your brain says, wait, is this the one? And has these safety mechanisms to give you objections like, what am I going to lose? And do I trust this? Is this real? Does it have to be like this? And then discomfort is the next thing that happens to us. Those 3 safety mechanisms are to keep us alive, but they make change really, really hard for us. Even people like me and like you, it sounds like, who think, oh, I thrive in these conditions. I like my schedule to change and I like new information and I like surprises. Still, even as we might be experiencing happiness, pride, relief, excitement. Oh, I applied for the job and I got it. Our brains still say, Corinna, are you sure it was your name in the email? Read that again. Did you really get the job?
Right.
What will your family think of this? Is this going to take time away from the commitments you've already made? Will there be somebody fun to eat lunch with like what you have now? It's still looking for anything dangerous. And it keeps us alive. You get in your car, and when you put your seatbelt on and you put it in and the click doesn't sound the same, your brain won't let go of that.
Like
Want
something's up with my seatbelt. It
Great.
didn't click right.
Yeah.
Something's off. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wonder if it's okay. You stop at a red light, you're trying to open it. Is it in the way you try to redo it? Because your brain's first job is to keep you alive. And thank goodness. Because if your seatbelt isn't seated correctly because your shirt is caught in it, then if you're hit, you're not going to be safe. So it's not a problem, but it is a fact. So resilience is our ability to navigate change, all of which is somewhat stressful, and come through it the kind of person we want to be. That said, you can't just say to a kid, okay, resilience is the ability to navigate change and come through it as a good person, go.
Hmm.
How? And it turns out that there are these 8 skills. So when you have more stress than you can handle that day, you utilize these 8 skills. If I had said to you, Corinna, if you were me that morning, where legit the day before I'd found out I was being audited by the IRS, I broke a tooth all the way down, like completely through, and found out that my mom, who lived 500 miles away, had fallen and was on her way to the emergency room with a broken pelvis. And I'm an only child, and I had 4 kids at home who were all 12 and under. You might say to me, gosh, who do you call? Like, who did you call, right? You need somebody to take care of your kids or somebody to take care of your mom. You can't be in 2 places that are 500 miles apart. And that one first mom to mom question is a great one, because what you're asking about is the resilient skill of building connections. Did I have the connections to be able to support? You might say to me, what did you down prioritize in that moment? And I can tell you, the IRS, by the way, is what I down prioritized in that moment.
Yeah, you can typically put them off if you pay the money.
But even without that, I literally put that envelope back on the mail shelf and thought, I will deal with that after my mom is sorted. And I think I need some dental work. Right. So, and that is an example of setting boundaries. And that's another resilient skill.
So we've got connections and boundaries. I'm hearing community in this, but I'm also hearing limits. So
Right. And those are the first 2, although I can't say first 2 because they're not in any particular order.
right.
Those are 2 of the 8 skills. And you don't have to have all of these in abundance, but if you have any of these, you've reached for them in times of change. And what my book is centered on and what the work that I do is centered on is all to say, hey, you're already an expert in you. So when I list these 8, you're already grading yourself. You're thinking like, and I'm guessing as a podcaster and a woman who's done everything you've done, you're thinking connections. I'm pretty good at that. Right. I understand.
It's one of my core values. Yeah. I mean, it's something I value, but then I think about boundaries, and I think we have some negative reinforcements out there, like people saying, oh, well, you should, do the yes challenge, where you say yes to everything over a period of time. And that is one surefire way for me to burn out in like 2 weeks. I have to say no to certain things, because otherwise I will pack my schedule from dawn till I go to bed. I won't be there for my family. I'll be stressed out when my kid asks for a sandwich. I've got to be clear that I have to have some time reserved for me to do nothing. Even if it's just sitting there and breathe or go to the gym or whatever. I cannot say yes to everything or I will burn out.
And often when you say yes to everything, you're saying no to your priorities.
Right.
One of the most useful things I ever learned was in a business conference years ago. And that was, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Make sure you know what it is. Just like you would never walk into a store, look at, or better yet, you would not walk into a car dealership to buy a car and not ask what it cost. You would just say, absolutely takes my credit card. You would not. You would say, what does it cost? And then I'll decide if it's worth it. Every time you have to know what your yeses are costing you. If they align with your priorities, say yes. I was in improv, saying yes is in my bones. But if you don't know what you're saying yes to, then you are as irresponsible as the person who plunked down a credit card, not knowing that cars can cost $160,000 if you're in the wrong dealership.
It can cost a lot more than that. Head into a Ferrari dealer.
Yeah. So those are 2 examples of skills that you already utilize. When we face difficulty, we are, for the most part, as adults, good at saying, okay, I'm going to solve the problem. We often look at external problems and forget to think, wait a minute, The problem here is that it's a change and it's making me feel unsafe. It's bringing up all these objections for me, or I'm focusing on the discomfort. And one of the best strategies we can use with ourselves and others to refocus on resilience is empathy. Especially for a group of do-gooders, I want to remind you that empathy is actually a change management strategy. Even though there's no solutions in empathy, explicitly, empathy cannot include fixing it. It has to stand alone. That all of the change navigation strategies that have proven to help other people be more resilient involve handing over power, handing over autonomy, because navigating change is different than fixing a broken pipe.
All right. Well, this makes me curious because I'm wondering how empathy actually relates to resilience. I guess I have a hard time finding a direct connection. So could you provide an example?
Absolutely. I'm going to use an example that no matter how you feel about it, everyone has seen play out in the last couple of years. We, as a society, found out in spring of 2020 that we were going through this global pandemic. And many of us spent several months, if not longer, wishing for and praying for and hoping for an end to that pandemic. A lot of us spent a lot of time working towards an end to the pandemic. Along come scientists and they say, we have created a vaccine that can help end the pandemic. Whatever you think about the vaccine, doesn't matter. And, spoiler alert, I'm a doctor, I'm pro-vax, but that doesn't matter for this example. Every person heard about that vaccine, a change, ending the pandemic that we had all longed for, hoped for, worked towards. And everybody's brain said, wait, what could I lose? Would the vaccine be damaging to me or damaging to my family members? Is it dangerous in some way? Wait, can I really trust it? How did they develop it this quickly? What's in it? How do we know that it'll work? How do we know it won't cause harm? Who says? Where did they get their information?
What is this newfangled mRNA vaccine, right?
Which isn't newfangled. We've been working on it for 20 years with cancer.
But I know, but that's what was in the media, like some new breakthrough.
Right, that's how it landed for everybody. And it should, because your brain's job, you are currently alive. So it's supposed to say, okay, yeah, I know there's a big threat out there, but we are currently alive. Is this thing the change that will kill us? So we can all recognize that everybody had, to larger and smaller extent, lost distrust and discomfort with this potential change that gets announced. I am a doctor. I was saying in last September, right, a year ago, last September, stick it in my eyeball. I want it right now. And also I thought loss, distrust, discomfort, I still chose, because choice is the next part of that cycle, to do it. I wanted it. I got it. I still got it in December of 2020. So I'm a really early adopter. And every doctor I know was. But when I talk to my patients who are vaccine hesitant, telling them that they should be grateful that this exists, that they should be more afraid of COVID than they are of the vaccine, that they should run and get this. I believe all those things to be true. Telling people that changes zero minds.
Yeah.
Telling someone how they should feel does not make them navigate change more readily. Telling them how they shouldn't feel, there's nothing to be afraid of, doesn't help anyone else navigate change more readily. Having empathy, I hear that you're afraid. I see that this does not seem trustworthy to you, that this feels too uncomfortable for you. Without trying to fix it, that changes the chemicals in people's brains and allows them, when they feel seen and heard, and genuinely, there can't be any sarcasm or any snark, when they genuinely feel seen and heard, because guess what? Even though I am incredibly pro-vax, I do see that people are scared.
Yeah.
I do know that people have been
holding back a laugh here.
Yeah.
I'm holding back a laugh here because I think you just revealed to me, I think a lot of what makes me resistant when my husband talks to me about things like this, because he tends to should me. And I think a lot of, or should me, I should probably break up those things. Oh, you should, or of course, this is, there's like this, of course, built into it. So you don't really you're not respecting the person's choice in a way. But I also think that there's this solution-oriented thinking that many of us, especially engineers like my husband and maybe doctors like you, basically get ingrained in doing is, oh, well, I have this knowledge. I'm going to impart it. And I'm going to impart it
I
by
will
just
fix you.
telling you what
Yeah.
you're supposed to do. And, or I'm going to fix you as opposed to listen to you and hear you and then commiserate with you a bit. And so it's like using empathy with choice that I think is what makes us so kind of insightful. I like that.
The other strategies that you need, and you'll see them really clearly with this vaccine idea, to help someone else navigate this change, right? And what I mean by navigate is make a choice, navigate it, and come through it the kind of person they want to be, which doesn't, by the way, mean they're going to come through it and make the decision you want them to, but they're going to navigate it and come through it true to themselves, their own values. And so they need, in addition to empathy, transparently sourced information. I have to be willing to say what I know about it, where I learned it, why I trust the people I learned it from, where they did their research. I need to give processing time. The faster, Corinna, that your husband wants you to make that decision, the less likely you are to navigate that change smoothly. And I don't even just mean smoothly to what he wants you to do. I mean smoothly at all. And then the last piece is what you talked about, and that's autonomy. The more choice, the more decision-making capability we can give someone else, the more they will be invested in navigating this change with us. And those aren't the 8 resilience skills in us. Those are ways to draw people's resilience out of themselves. But it's important to give yourself some empathy too. When you open up an email, you're somebody who changes jobs a lot, and you open up another email that tells you you got the job, and you find yourself needing to go back and reread it, not wanting to tell anybody about it because you're not sure you believe it, and worried about what it's going to mean for the rest of your life. And you say, oh, why aren't I over this? I've been through this so many times. Why can't I just feel happy? I'll say, when I'm in the office and I check a 5-year-old's reflexes with my reflex hammer, if I stand right in front of him while I check his knee reflex, what's going to happen to me?
You're going to get kicked.
I'm going to get kicked. Should that 5-year-old get in trouble for kicking me? I don't think so. I'm the one who hit his knee reflex. I should know to stand to the side. When you encounter change, you should know, oh, this reflex happens. My brain, instead of my leg, is going to kick out like that. And then it'll go back, and then we can think about what we want to decide. But that reflex, don't waste time being angry at yourself about that.
Right. Well, I want to bring up an earlier episode. I actually interviewed Aiden Nepom, who also interestingly has a background in improv, and she is a change expert. And one of the things that she likes to say is that we have a perception that change is bad. Like that's automatically where we come from. And if we automatically come from a perspective that change is bad, then every time that we encounter change, it's like it compounds the issue. So she likes to just remind herself that change is, and to remind the people that she's working with. It's just like we can acknowledge that we're reacting to the change, but then just move from that into acceptance a little bit more quickly. And the stress that it provides us is going to be lessened.
I like that. It's like weather is.
Yeah.
One of the things that my kids will come downstairs when they don't feel well and be like, do I have a temperature? And I'm like, everybody has a temperature because you're not dead. Right? What you want to know is my temperature abnormal? But everybody has a temperature. We always have weather. We only talk about it when it's going to be an inconvenience, but everybody has weather and everybody has change.
So if you were to boil down what you've learned through this process of really digging into this concept of resilience, it comes to these 8 core skills that we need to develop. But what is the first step for somebody to get there? I mean, I would imagine also picking up and reading your book, looking at your website, some of the speeches that you've given. I mean, you've given some really incredible
this change
talks.
by being super self-serving. No, I think that I think that the first thing you could do is say, okay, what are already my go-tos? What are my go-to strategies when I have change to navigate? Or put another way that might be easier to think of, when I don't like how I feel, or when I don't like my situation, when it's uncomfortable, what do I do? In moments where I'm trying to call on my resilience, what are my go-to strategies? And somebody might know, they might say, oh, I call my sister. I binge watch a TV show for a few episodes. And those are the strategies that we use to navigate our discomfort. Those are really valuable. But the first thing I want you to do is to recognize your own expertise. What are you already good at? And actually, in my book, one of the very first things I do is I list these 8 skills and I ask you to rate yourself just for yourself. Give yourself a pretest. Remember in second grade, now teachers do this a lot. You get to a new spelling unit, they give your kid a pretest on the spelling words so they know which group to put them in for that unit. If you already know EE words, but you don't totally get EA words, then no point making you relearn all the EE words will move you up. And if you don't understand this idea of double vowels at all, we got to go back a little bit. So you give yourself this assessment and you say, okay, I give myself an 8 out of 10 at building connections. I know people. You don't have to know a lot of people. This is about depth more than width. But I know people, the people I know, I feel comfortable reaching out to, asking them questions, leaning on them, helping them with things. Great. Okay. I get building connections. Setting boundaries. Yeah. Okay. I don't feel really great at it, but I also don't understand how it relates to this. So I'm not sure that I find that compelling. The next one is about being able to open to change, open to different possible futures. And a litmus test for this is if you are rewarding yourself for, like you're celebrating in some way by ordering in food, and you're ordering in from a restaurant where you have a favorite dish and you call to order it and they tell you they're out. How crushed are you? Meaning, can you picture ordering anything else and still enjoying your celebration, or ordering from anywhere else and still enjoying your celebration? Or did that kill it? And if that kills it, you may be somebody who needs to work some on opening to different possibilities. That's a really important resilience skill. Is it managing discomfort that's really hard for you? Is it, and then as you go through these 8 and one of them will ring for you as not just, I don't feel great at that, but also, and it would be really useful.
Mm-hmm.
You think about a change you're struggling to navigate and think, that's the one, if I could wave a magic wand, I would want right now. And then that's where to start.
I think one of the most challenging arenas for us to navigate right now in times of COVID is that connections piece. Because some of us, I'm an extrovert. I'm not being able to get in front of people person to person the same way that I was 2 years ago. And I was already accustomed to working from home, right? I was already doing that. I've been a contractor for most of the last 10 years. I've mostly worked for myself. I have a home office, so that shift wasn't that bad. I was going to grad school when it hit. Okay, had to pivot. I moved a friend in to help me take care of my kids so I could keep pace with grad school and still work. Now my house felt smaller. I had all of these changes, that I navigated to work through, but I was balancing on a knife's edge. And the one thing I think I've sacrificed over the last 2 years, and I think that people will really resonate with this, is those personal relationships where you kind of covet and maintain and develop and nourish when you have these opportunities to gather. And since gathering hasn't been happening the same way, a lot of people are feeling more disconnected, or like that safety net isn't there the same way. I hear it from people all over the globe. So I wondered if you had any specific tips for people that might be feeling that way, struggling to find their community or struggling to maintain kind of the depth of connection that they had with their, let's say their core safety net, their friends and support system.
I've been saying all along, check on your extroverted friends. We're not okay.
Yeah, we're not okay. Yeah.
But there are some ways, and the best ways to get those chemicals flowing, that oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and the dopamine that people get from connections, is to surprise someone in a great way. And you can do that right now if you have a phone. You can pick up your phone and say to yourself, okay, I'm gonna block off the next 5 minutes to send a text to 3 different people that I want to feel more connected to, telling them something I really admire about them or appreciate about them. And that's it. That's all.
Yeah, and a text as opposed to social media, right? Because
text
it's different.
Right. Text because it's one-to-one, but not a phone call because you don't know when you're catching them or where what space they're in.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, I've saved voicemails that helped to bolster me in this time and gone back to them. Even simple ones like from my niece wishing me a happy birthday or a happy new year. And they've offered me comfort because it's like there's warmth in the voice and it's something I can go back to. Yeah. And I will say that the power of podcasting has helped to solve it for me as an extrovert, because I get to connect with wonderful people like you, hear these really in-depth stories. And it scratches that itch, maybe not in the same way, but in some way it's comparable. So at any rate. I love that. Well, I just want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I do have a final question. I'd like to know if there was anything I haven't asked that you wish I had, or some thought you wanted to leave the audience with, all of our listeners. I'd love to hear it.
When we encounter stress, we sometimes feel like we must have, in some sense, failed. That's really the dirty underbelly of this idea that stress is toxic. We're told if you're stressing somebody out, you're the villain. If somebody is stressing you out, you should get away from that relationship. Instead of saying, is there stress as the metric for whether something is good or bad, I want you to ask a different question. Will this experience, person, relationship, task, whatever it is, will it serve me? Is it serving me? Does it match my priorities? And if it does, then use your resilience skills. And if it doesn't, then set a boundary.
Oh, fantastic. And that's the one I'm going to work on. So I'll have to let you know how that goes.
I would like to.
Now, if our listeners want to connect with you directly or to just review all of the great work you're doing and get your book, where should they go?
The easiest place to find me is my website, which is askeddrg.com. And my book, we can put a link to Amazon in the show notes, if that's okay.
Oh, of course. I always do that. As always, I'll be sure to include links to items we discussed in show notes, including Dr. G's lovely new book on recovering from stress and being more resilient. Now, it's time for that simple ask. I'd love it if you would share this episode and our website with your friends. It's through sharing the in-depth discussions like this one that we get more people on board and that we ultimately can help them to live a more resilient life. Together, we can all create the future that we want. And I encourage you to visit my action page as well on caremorebebetter.com. Lean into discovery, figure out what matters to you, stay curious, ask important questions, and get involved. Thank you now and always for being a part of this pod and this community, because together we can do so much more. We can care more and we can be better. We can even regenerate Earth and be less stressed along the way. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.